The radio continued its grim warning. There is no honor to be had here, only danger. The danger is to the body, mind, and soul. We considered ourselves to be a powerful civilization, and it destroyed us. The danger is long-lasting and will still be here when you listen. The only things that remain are the dead and those that wish they were dead. To any who remain alive in space, do not come to grave. You will only carry the danger beyond the planet to new worlds. There was silence for a moment before the message began to repeat. My name is Tiffany Riley, sole standing seraphim of the Republic of the Seven Cities. Our planet is not a place of life. There's only death here. This message is a warning for anyone who remains alive beyond the planet. Grave isn't safe. This is not a place of honor. I took more pictures of grave below. Listening to the recorded voice, I wished I could tune the radio into other frequencies, but like the rules said, the radio only had one frequency. The cameras around the OSS showed many broken satellites that almost looked like they were broken from the inside. And of course, I checked the moon again. Luna was sickly. The bases were all much larger. The Imbrium base practically filled the entire sea, making a third of the moon's face shining steel and glittering glass. I could also see large red-brown patches on the regolith that looked like smeared lipstick across Luna's broken face. The worst part was the moon's new craters. Merecrisium on the eastern part of the moon's face was 3 times as large and made out of blasted glass, and the Tycho crater had the biggest change. What was in my world a peaceful white crater that was easily visible from Earth was now a glass scar. The apparent remnants of Steel City were clearly nuked. Molten metal and rock fused into one and twisted beyond recognition, like a deity playing with clay, baking it halfway, and then leaving it in the rain. Cracks ran for miles in spidery veins of white, black, silver, brown, glass, and even most hauntingly of all, scarlet. And in the center of the radioactive glass crater, something was both moving and alive. What grew in the middle of the crater in the white sunlight resembled a tree in shape. It was like a manzanita, a tree, smooth and red-looking in the lunar soil, except manzanita didn't grow larger than the mountains. The branches of manzanita trees were a mix of red bark, steel, glass, and rock that moved in the non-existent breeze with a regular pulse. Trees also didn't have roots that grew thousands of miles, pulsing and undulating, more akin to pulsing veins than gradual growth. The roots more closely resembled tentacles or blood vessels that connected and diverged from each other at random points. And manzanita trees didn't grow yellow fruits with red knotted veins. It felt like this was something worth taking a picture of, so I zoomed into the tree on the moon to take a few pictures. But when I zoomed in, I saw that what I thought were yellow fruits growing all over the tree was actually yellow eyes. Each eye was hundreds or even thousands of meters large. The sclera was jaundiced yellow, and the veins pulsed and were as thick as roads, and the iris was as red as blood. And the pupils. The pupils were dark and deep as the abyss. Even the smallest of eyes was large enough to drown the OSS in its entirety without even needing to blink. I snapped a photo when every eye on the tree shifted and stared towards the OSS. I felt like I was in a staring contest with an eldritch intelligence. It stared at me through the cameras, the abyss within all of the eyes. It judged as it stared through the camera and into me. I stared back, and it felt like I was staring for hours, but it must have only been a few minutes. As I stared into the abyss, I felt resonance from the howl shake through me. It's hard to explain, but where the howl earlier came from, this time it was like the resonance came from my bones, and the howl escaped from my throat as I stared down the abomination on the moon. The howl that echoed in the OSS no longer felt mournful. It was a warning, a threat, and a promise. A promise from whatever that was on the moon. If it tried to hurt me, I would hurt it a lot worse. And as that howl echoed, I felt powerful and secure. And in that moment, I was certain I could face any threat. And I could even rip the celestial sphere that once overwhelmed me into dust. As the howl echoed for the last time, I stared as the eyes in the video widened, almost like the Tycho abomination was aware of the black moon and somehow heard her howl hundreds of thousands of kilometers away through the vacuum of space. Then the abyss within those many eldritch eyes did something I never thought could happen. They turned away from me, almost like it was out of fear. I stared into the abyss stared back, and it was scared of what it saw within me. I touched my throat where the howl came from. That strength that was inside me faded too, but I could still feel some warmth remaining, almost like a memory of the strength remained within my muscles. A welcome change from all the cold fear I'd been feeling all day. I flipped the cameras to focus on Grave, the planet below, and then I realized the voice on the radio wasn't repeating the same message. Who is that? Hello? Is anyone out there? Does the black moon howl? Tiffany asked. Those final words caused something to shift inside of me. It was like a snake made of emotion and power unfurled from around my heart and crawled up my throat before slithering out as words as I spoke. Only when commanding her legion, I said on the radio, not sure why I responded the way I did. There was a pause before she continued. You're alive, and you must be Samuel Lastaname. Have you spoken to the Red Prince? Do you have the means of contacting her? She sounded desperate, like she knew it was already a long shot, but it was all she had. So I responded to the radio. How do you know my name? And I kinda know the Red Prince. I mean, she sent me an email, but I'm out of contact with her right now. What is going on? I got your name from a story the Red Prince once told me. The Star Sailor was lost through space and time, never in one place, changing on a dime. Penultimate legion of the Black Moon, first hero of the Seraphim, marooned. She told me of an astronaut named Samuel Lastaname visiting Kardashev, Primeval, and many other worlds, and how you connected with other shards of all that is. I don't know what's going on in the OSS, but I do know that Red can help you. But can you bring her a message from me? She will know who Tiffany Riley is. I checked my orbit clock. Somehow, there were only a few minutes left before my orbit reset. I would be out of range very quickly. I could simply go quiet. My radio wouldn't turn off, but I didn't have to respond. I remember back on Earth when another candidate tried to pass me a note. I just ignored it and threw it away, never even looking at it. This would be even easier. I didn't even have to respond, and she would never know that I ignored her. But something in me didn't want to ignore Tiffany. And for the first time for as long as I can remember, I decided not to be silent. Okay, I will bring a message to her, but be quick. I only have a few minutes. I said into the radio while I wondered why I did that. It was not even a second after I was done speaking before Tiffany relayed her message to me. Tell Red that the 11th plague is coming. It is vital she takes up her heater when I take up my own. If she waits too long, the 11th plague will turn Earth into grave. Wait, what's the 11th plague? Did you see what was living on the moon? What's down on the planet is a lot worse. I glanced down at the atmosphere, which was still gray and foggy as Oceanus, but I could see movement underneath the fog, almost like something was circling the OSS underneath, but something that large to stir up the air in the clouds like that would have to be at least the size of a continent, dwarfing not just the abomination on the moon, but the moon itself. The next part of my message is more personal, but no less important. Tell the Red Prince, tell her that she's my dearest friend and that I always loved her, ever since I met her. I never got the chance to tell her this, and she deserves to know. Please tell her. For me. At her final word, the orbit clock clicked, and the clouds below parted to reveal a blue and green Earth for me. Tiffany Riley, gone as a ghost, while the console told me that I had a new message from the Red Prince.
I know the Black Moon howls because I know many things. But from your response, it seems you heard her. Be warned. Though you may use some of her power, you cannot command, control, contain, or even consume her power. Use too much power and you will be overwhelmed or even killed. I advise against using any power or magic that may appear to you, at least until you get back to Earth. That being said, here are a few things I can provide for you to follow up on. Look out for anything that looks like a small playing card or even has a Roman numeral on it. That will be the Arcana. Most likely, I think they're either using 2, the High Priestess, 16, the Tower, the 18th, the Moon, or 20th, Judgment. These are the only Arcana, major or minor, that can create paths. Inform me if of anything strange you've seen that feels esoteric. Any information about the worlds you visit can also be helpful. I have reasonable assumption that the Arcana is kept in a hidden section of the OSS, and I believe that the Argus is a reference to observing Altis, not merely the nations of Earth, but all that is. So logically, the Emperor is using the OSS and the Arcana within not merely to observe the paths between the worlds, but to create them. Every path opened is a source of trade, observation, and power, all owned by the Emperor. A hidden advantage is that the other nations can't even dream of. So let's see if we can find that information. If it isn't on your console, it'll be in the hidden section of the OSS. My recommendation is to check your console for hidden files or directories, and then if you cannot find anything, only then check out the hidden section, but only with great caution. Try to find anything with keywords Argus, Paths, Altis, or Arcana. Let me know if you find information, and I will inform you if something else has come my way. But if you find any information, please inform me.
Message said. I uploaded the recording of Grave to my liaison while I thought about how I would phrase the message to Red Prince. So I typed back to her. I was briefly in the orbit of a planet called Grave. There was someone called Tiffany Riley on the radio who wanted me to warn you of something. It was specifically to the Red Prince. She said that the 11th plague was coming and to take up the heater when she did. I don't know what heater she was referring to, but I'm going to assume that you know what that means. She also told me that you were her dearest friend and she loved you ever since she met you, Again, I'm not sure what any of this means, but she considered it important enough to tell a complete stranger to pass on the message to you. Oh, and also she told me you knew about me under the name of the Star Sailor. Is that how you know me? Is there any information about something called the Seraphim or the Legion of the Black Moon? She had a whole prophecy mentioning the Star Sailor being a part of them both. I will check over the OSS as far as I can see, if I can find any references to Project Argus or to any Arcana, and keep an eye out for anything else that's weird. Best of luck on Earth. After sending the message, I wondered if it was too intimate of a closing statement. We didn't know each other, and quite honestly, she was someone hired by my brother to help me out. There was no obligation for her to be nice to me other than the fact she was hired. Still, even as I thought about if there was better ways to sign off, I did some snooping on my console. My initial search told me about as much as I thought I knew about the console. It only had one accessible program, act as an electronic post box solely between me and my liaison. I had no idea how Red managed to bypass it, but when I responded to the message that I got from her, her message simply disappeared, with no way for me to contact her or reread the old messages. But after my initial search, I tried something new. I checked the technical specifications of the console itself. The OS was old, a double I Model 7, the same operating systems used by both cash registers and military archivists all over the world for being reliable and too expensive to update, while most businesses and citizens used double I Model 11. Every piece was built by the lowest bidder, I reminded myself as I checked the physical specifications of the console. There, I found something that was very unusual. The RAM, essentially how fast the computer could process information, was a lot larger than it reasonably should. A little over 256 gigabytes of RAM. For perspective, that's the processing power of 32 standard computers working on the same problem at the same time. But my email program was capped at only 4 gigabytes. So, what were the other 252 gigabytes being used for? But the storage capacity was an even bigger surprise. Most computers have a terabyte or two in storage capacity, sometimes a lot more, but generally that's how much it was. The console on the OSS, that was roughly the size of a microwave and running the same email program that hadn't been updated in 20 years, somehow had the storage capacity of 5 petabytes, or even more storage than could be held on 5,000 standard computers. That was impossible. Even with the most advanced virtual storage known to the MSU, that hardware could not be stored on a console that was clearly meant to be a thin client. These were the statistics of a server farm, and that kind of hardware would need its own separate room with a powerful source of energy, strong coolant, or HVAC to keep the processors from overheating, and there was no room for such a thing on the OSS. Except maybe in the hatch. I glanced over at the hatch. That very well could be hiding away a server farm or maybe even a small supercomputer. I checked the console one last time. There had to be more information somewhere. After nearly 30 minutes with no new leads and no messages from anyone, I almost gave up until I saw something hidden. Where it was hidden, it was hard to explain. It was like an icon that was only visible between two different pixels on the screen. But at the same time, the icon took up the entire screen, just behind the wallpaper. Like a mosaic hidden because I was too busy looking at individual stones of the art. The hidden icon was a smiling sun surrounded by 8 differently colored crescent moons. When I clicked on the icon, my screen changed, and this time it got a lot harder to read and understand. Technically, there was nothing wrong with the screen. The words were understandable and readable, just white print on a dark background. But the letters making up the words were constantly changing. They would change font, orientation, language, and even what the letters would shift. But still, when you read the letters together, they formed words. Words that were technically different, but still had the same definition or close enough that it was understandable. The top link said it was a hypervisor, but then it was a virtual machine or a digital computer before shifting back to the hypervisor, which gave me somewhat of an answer of what was happening with the console. What I thought was the OS and the computer I was working on this entire time was just a virtual machine on a much larger server. A virtual machine was a bit like a computer within a computer. It could be a different model, different OS, and much more easily limited, because the background features wouldn't be accessible to the user on the virtual machine. They were often used to create earlier OS models to interact with programs that were no longer compatible with newer operating systems. Video game consoles were based on a similar idea, when they were running games on a system that was no longer supported. The system existed within another system, and you were none the wiser. So, if I was just working on a system that was within a larger system, the question remained, what was the larger system? The simple black background with white text made me think it was a server core. No graphics to use, just a lot of reading and raw data in a language I could barely read. Skimming over the words and already feeling a headache form behind my eyes, I tried to find something worth the literal headache. Data collection, inputs collated, information spreadsheet. Wait, was I just reading the same thing over and over? It certainly felt like it. Not sure what else to do, I pressed enter over the data collection link, and a massive spreadsheet appeared in front of me. Every bit of data on the screen was the same as the measurements on my dials. But the spreadsheet was constantly growing, adding results seen on the dials so quickly I had a hard time keeping up. But thankfully the y-axis had the times listed. The data collection program was collecting the results on the dials in a second-by-second format. This was a level of data collection that should not be feasible, and yet here I was watching the spreadsheet grow in front of my eyes like an assembly line, taking raw data of space and chewing it before spitting out as these headache-inducing numbers right in front of me. They were easier to read, but a lot harder to understand, if that makes any sense. For example, one value would have a 5, but then it would twist into a 17, and then an H, and then 4.98 before starting the process over again. This felt like utter nonsense and something that came out of a Charles Dodgson poem rather than something that was used for scientific research. Still, though, this felt like evidence as I took a picture of the screen and left that spreadsheet to head back to the main screen. Overwhelmed by what felt like dozens, if not hundreds of shifting links, I just clicked over to the hypervisor, where everything felt comfortable and easy to understand. I watched the blinking cursor over and over as a thought occurred to me. It felt quiet on the screen. I don't mean it was literally quiet. There was no actual sound that could be heard or felt, but the shifting script felt like it was making a buzzing noise in the back of my mind. It was like the general din that you heard in the background of a movie. It sounded normal and like people were talking, but if you focused on the background noise rather than the noise in the foreground, you realized it was all just nonsense. Sure, you may recognize a word or two, but the context, tone, and meaning were all jumbled up and impossible to understand. Wait, shifting script? Where did that term come from? I never heard anything like that before, but it fits so well here. And thinking about the shifting script, it was like it was itching its way into my mind. Something deep within me enjoyed the way they looked and wanted to see more, read more, devour it all like I was starving. I don't drink. I never tried chems, and I never found anything I truly found addicting. But the feeling was reminding me of what my father described as craving for his alcohol. Something all consuming within you that made everything else feel irrelevant. Anything you were doing or not doing was just related to getting this into your body. Something in me changed when I was around shifting script, and now that I was without the shifting script, I wanted more. My thoughts were thinking about how easy it would be to just click over to the hypervisor, look over all of the near illegible words. I needed it. The script scratched away inside my mind, and if I didn't feed it, then it would crawl out of my mind, leaving me only a husk. But as it skittered through my mind, a familiar shifting occurred within my heart. The howl that now lived within me felt the foreign intruder, and it was not happy. Even as I clenched my jaw shut, the howl escaped through my gritted teeth. A howl of a man in pain. A howl of a man about to cause pain. And the howl of a charging army all echoed through my mouth and through the OSS. When it finished, I could no longer feel itching within my mind, nor could I exactly remember what the shifting script looked like. I remembered it was changing values and letters while keeping the same definition, but the exact curve and cut of the shapes were no longer there. My desire was now dulled. What the hell was that? I asked the empty space station. I wasn't myself for a moment. I was someone who was willing to stare at the shifting script for the rest of my days. But I also knew that if I did that, then the itching inside my mind would have turned into scratching, then clawing, and eventually digging, as the letters of that intoxicating language would be stained and burned into every square centimeter of the OSS. And even then, it wouldn't be enough. That was a dark path I watched my father take, and I would not go down it myself. I noticed my console had a message from my liaison. As I prepared to check the message, my anxious heart was already racing. They never contacted me with good news, and they would probably be sending me a message, either about some new tedious task that would take away my only free time, or announce another orbit around an alternate Earth. Still, though, not reading the message wouldn't keep it from existing, and refusing to read it meant that the message inside was every bad message until it was read. Clicking on the message, I read the short missive and sighed. Of course, why not? The message read, "Your console will be unavailable for 72 hours, and so will your radio as part of an update, beginning immediately." After I read the message, the console turned black, and my own face stared back in the glass. Do you think they do that on purpose, or it just happens like that? I asked nobody in particular as I looked around the OSS. Already bored with the same room, my eyes drifted to the window below as I saw something that should not be possible. Taped to the window leading out to the void was an envelope. That was definitely not there just a minute ago. Picking up the letter, I stared at the front. Sure enough, it was addressed to me, and it was from Red Prince of River City. And the stamp in the right corner was a winged woman carrying a torch in hand. A figure I didn't recognize, but somewhere in my memory said she was familiar, but it wouldn't say from where. Anything better to do, I opened the envelope, and the inside was a pen and a blank piece of paper that was folded around the real message. I unfolded the letter from the Red Prince as I began to read.
Well, the news you gave me is quite concerning. I'll need to consult with Tiffany as soon as I can, but I have no information on any legendary figure named the Star Sailor or the Seraphim. The only information I can find on those names is the Star Sailor is the word astronaut, translates into from Hellenese, but I am not sure what it means in this context. Seraphim is a plural word that describes the highest ranking of angels. It can mean war angels, burning one, burning serpent, or may use it as some generic term for a six-winged angel. Titles like Star Sailor and Seraphim are very dependent on the context of what they are being used for, or the person using them. For example, Azrael can be the angel that took every firstborn from Kemet, or the angel that delivered the prophetic dreams to Joseph. But without the context, all you know is that Azrael is in Kemet, and you don't know if it's to take life or save it. As for the Legion of the Black Moon, I do have some information about that. Bear in mind, I'm summarizing the entire textbook's worth of information on Astoria. The Legion of the Black Moon was one of the 8 nations before the unification. They worshipped the Black Moon and acted very similar to the way the Hunters Guild acts in our world. Hunting monsters, acting as a diplomatic arm between human and non-human communities, and saving lives where they could. However, they also practiced sacrifice to the Black Moon and to their leader, who they called the Voice of the Black Moon. The leader of the Legion was an angel who said to be unable to understand the Black Moon's intent and speak for it. Nowadays, the Legion of the Black Moon isn't practiced but still widely studied. That all being said, the mention of the Seraphim and the Legion of the Black Moon, I will advise caution if you see any angels. You'll know that they are by their reflective masks they wear over their face. Do not remove their masks, no matter what. If you see a winged being without a reflective mask, do not let them know you see them. That is not an angel. She is too busy to take your questions. I will continue to investigate down here. Have you have any luck with the council?
I finished the letter from the Red Prince and stared down at the blank piece of paper. How was I expected to respond to her with my console out of commission for the next 72 hours? And more importantly, how the hell did a detective on Earth manage to get a letter into the sealed space station? But then a shiver ran up my spine. The only way to get a letter to me here is if someone was hiding on the OSS with the letter. What actual proof did I have that the Red Prince was on Earth? All I had was her word and the word of a stranger from a dead planet. Her hiding on the OSS would explain how she knew everything that she knew. She would be able to read the rules, hear the howl, and even be able to send messages to my console. There must be another console hidden within that hatch where she could send messages to my own console. And if she was hidden in the OSS, then maybe everything else was false. If I found her, then there was no Project Argus, no secret plan to connect to new worlds, and no conspiracy to keep me hidden from the world. So I took a heavy flashlight designed to work even in the vacuum of space as I drifted over to the hatch and peered inside. Sure enough, all I could see was the ladder, a few blinking lights, and a lot of darkness. I grabbed the handle, and there was a hiss of escaping air as I opened the hatch. I shone the light down into the hatch, and the ladder extended at least 10 meters down as I half drifted and half slid down the ladder into the darkness below.